The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor of the entrance hall, and Victoria Sterling didn't even flinch.
What is all this? I'm on a call.
It was the third one this week.
They were playing and the vase just
She
slipped.
stood
Clean
at the
this
top
up
of the grand
now.
staircase in her tailored
We'll
Armani
get through
suit,
this.
phone pressed to her
I'm
ear,
here.
watching
Always.
her 5
Always.
daughters wreak havoc below, while nanny number 22 gathered her belongings with trembling hands. Victoria's voice cut through the chaos like ice. I don't care what the board thinks, Gerald. Tell them the merger happens on my terms or not at all. Her daughters, Isabel, 9 years old, the twins, Grace and Hannah, at 7.5, Charlotte, who went by Nora, at 6, and little Ruby, just 4.5, were currently using the foyer as their personal battlefield. Ruby, the youngest, with wild auburn curls, was finger-painting on the white walls with what Victoria desperately hoped was just chocolate pudding. The nanny's voice rose to a near shriek. Mrs. Sterling, I cannot work under these conditions. Those children are, they're... Victoria supplied the word coldly, ending her call. Monsters. Yes, I'm aware. That's why I'm paying you $4,000 a week. The correction came bitter. Was paying you. Nora zoomed past on a motorized toy car, nearly clipping the nanny's ankles. The woman's designer bag was already on her shoulder, her face flushed with anger and something that looked like pity. No amount of money is worth this. Your daughters need more than a nanny, Mrs. Sterling. They need... Victoria cut her off, already descending the stairs. Thank you for your input. Claire will have your final check ready by morning. As the front door slammed behind nanny number 22, Victoria surveyed her empire of chaos. Her ex-husband David had left her with 5 daughters and a massive settlement 2.5 years ago, running off with his 23-year-old assistant. Victoria had won the divorce, won sole custody, won everything except the ability to manage her own children. She'd built a tech company from nothing and turned it into a $2.1 billion enterprise. But these 5 small humans defeated her daily. Victoria's voice carried that boardroom authority when she spoke. Isabel, get your sister down from that chandelier right now. Volume made no difference. Experience had taught her that lesson repeatedly. 8-year-old Isabel, the ringleader, with her mother's sharp features and her father's dark hair, looked down from where she was helping Grace scale the antique furniture. The question came laced with familiar defiance. Why should we? You're just going to hire another babysitter who hates us anyway. The words struck deeper than Victoria cared to admit. She checked her watch. 2:47. Video conference with Tokyo investors in 13 minutes, and her house looked like a war zone. Everyone to your rooms. Now. She used her boardroom voice, the one that made senior executives quake. Her daughter stared at her with identical expressions of defiance. I said now. They scattered like startled birds, but Victoria knew it was temporary. Within an hour, they'd be back, pushing boundaries, testing limits, searching for something she couldn't give them. She didn't have time for tantrums and tea parties. She had a company to run, investors to impress, a reputation to maintain. Her phone buzzed, Claire, her executive assistant. The voice on the other end sounded apologetic. Victoria, the emergency cleaning service is here. You said the house needed to be presentable for tomorrow's gathering. Tomorrow's dinner party for potential investors. The house had to look perfect. Send them in, and Claire, start calling agencies. I need nanny number 23 by Monday. Claire's hesitation came through clearly. Ma'am, we've exhausted every premium agency in the tri-state area. They've started declining our requests. Victoria's jaw tightened. The admission cost her. Then find someone from out of state. I don't care if they have to relocate from Alaska. Just find someone who can handle 5 children. She ended the call and headed to her home office, stepping over broken toys and scattered crayons. Behind her, the front door opened again, the cleaning crew, probably horrified by what they'd walked into. Let them be horrified. Everyone was horrified by the Sterling household. She'd gotten used to the judgment, the whispered criticisms at school functions, the pitying looks from other mothers who had perfectly behaved children and loving husbands. Victoria Sterling had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. But she'd be damned if she'd admit it to anyone, least of all herself. She shut the office door and pulled up her presentation, forcing her mind back to profit margins and market projections. Numbers made sense. Numbers had rules. Numbers never looked at you with disappointed eyes and asked why you didn't love them enough. From somewhere upstairs, a crash followed by giggles. She didn't even look up from her computer screen. Whatever it was, she'd deal with it later. She always dealt with it later. At precisely 3 o'clock, her video call began, and Victoria Sterling transformed. Her voice became warm, her smile confident, her entire demeanor that of a woman completely in control. The Tokyo investors never suspected that behind her professionally styled blonde hair and flawless makeup, a domestic disaster was unfolding in real time. That's how Victoria operated, perfect on the surface, chaos underneath, and a wall so high between the two that no one could see where one ended and the other began. The call lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, the house had gone suspiciously quiet. Victoria knew that silence in a house with 5 children was never a good sign. She rose from her desk, steeling herself for whatever destruction awaited, and opened her office door. Standing in her foyer, surrounded by her daughters, was a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark brown hair graying at the temples and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a simple navy work uniform with Cooper Home Services embroidered on the chest. But what made Victoria stop in her tracks wasn't the man himself. It was her daughters. All 5 of them sitting quietly on the floor, listening to a story he was telling while he cleaned. His voice carried a gentle warmth. And then the little dragon realized that breathing fire wasn't about being angry. It was about protecting the things you love. Ruby, her impossible, untamable 4.5-year-old Ruby, was leaning against his leg, completely transfixed. The twins were sitting cross-legged, actually sitting still. Even Isabel had abandoned her usual scowl of defiance. A little girl sat nearby, about 6 years old, quietly coloring. She had the same warm brown eyes as the man and a smile that seemed to light up her whole face. The man looked up and saw Victoria. He straightened immediately, a professional smile replacing his storytelling warmth. "Mrs. Sterling, I presume. Marcus Cooper. I'm here to handle the emergency cleaning you requested. I hope you don't mind. Your daughters wanted to hear a story while I worked." Victoria found her voice, though it came out sharper than intended. "And you thought it appropriate to stop working and entertain them?" Something flickered in his eyes, not anger, but something sadder. Understanding, maybe. "I didn't stop working, ma'am. I'm cleaning while I talk. Multitasking, same time." He gestured to the now spotless foyer floor where the vase had shattered. The antique side table had been polished, the walls wiped clean of chocolate, every surface gleaming. "Your daughters aren't a distraction. They're just lonely." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria felt her defenses slam into place with practiced speed. "Mr. Cooper, I hired a cleaning service, not a child psychologist. If you could focus on the job you were paid for," the little girl's voice piped up, small but clear. "Daddy does both." Victoria's eyes snapped to the corner where the child had been sitting so quietly she hadn't noticed her before. The girl looked up at Victoria with those same warm eyes. Daddy cleans and tells the best stories. That's why everyone likes him. Dan's voice gentled. Lily, remember what we talked about. Indoor voices in other people's homes. The little girl nodded solemnly and returned to her coloring book. But she looked up at Victoria's daughters with such open friendliness that something twisted in Victoria's chest. When was the last time her girls had looked at anyone like that? Like they trusted them, like they felt safe. Victoria tried again, her voice softer now. Mr. Cooper, I apologize. It's been a difficult day. Please continue with your work. And the story was fine. His eyes met hers for just a moment. In that brief connection, Victoria saw something that unsettled her. He wasn't intimidated by her wealth or her ice queen reputation. He looked at her like she was just another tired parent trying her best and failing miserably. And somehow, that was worse than contempt. Pity she could dismiss. Understanding was dangerous. As she turned to retreat to her office, Isabel's voice caught her, small and uncertain in a way her eldest daughter never sounded. Will you finish the story about the dragon? Dan's reply came warm. Of course. The dragon still has a lot to learn about being brave. Victoria closed her door and leaned against it, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't name. Through the wood, she could hear her daughters laughing. Actually laughing. When was the last time she'd heard that sound in this house? When was the last time she'd been the one to cause it? She returned to her desk, but the numbers on her screen blurred. Outside her door, a stranger with kind eyes and worn hands was doing what 22 highly qualified nannies couldn't do. And for the first time in 2 years, Victoria Sterling wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd been fighting the wrong battles all along. An hour later, Victoria found herself inventing excuses to leave her office. She needed water. Then she needed to check the thermostat. Then she absolutely had to review the mail that could have waited until tomorrow. Each time she passed through the main areas of her home, she witnessed something that should have been impossible. Dan Cooper was transforming her house. But more impossibly, he was transforming her daughters. By 5 o'clock, the man had somehow cleaned the entire first floor while simultaneously keeping all 5 girls entertained and miraculously well-behaved. Victoria watched from the kitchen doorway as he showed Nora the proper way to fold a cloth napkin, his daughter Lily demonstrating alongside him. The 6-year-old was completely absorbed, her tongue poking out in concentration as she tried to match the neat triangles Dan created. His hands moved with practiced ease. My grandfather taught me this when I was about your age. He ran a small cleaning business in Cleveland for 40 years. He said that taking care of things, even small things like napkins, shows respect, not for the things, but for the people who will use them. Grace, one of the twins, looked genuinely curious for the first time Victoria could remember. Did your grandfather teach you lots of stuff? Dan's voice carried deep warmth. He did. My whole family worked together. My grandparents, my dad, eventually me. Best training I ever got. Grandpa used to say, honest work with your hands builds character better than any classroom. Hannah, the other twin, stated matter-of-factly, our mom is always busy. She has important meetings. Dan didn't miss a beat. Your mama must be very smart and strong to run a big company. That takes a special kind of courage. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. When was the last time someone had defended her to her own children? When was the last time someone had seen her work as anything other than neglect? But Isabel interjected, her 9-year-old wisdom carrying an edge of bitterness. She doesn't play with us. She's always in her office. Victoria started to step into the room, but Dan raised a gentle hand. Can I tell you something my Lily's mama used to say? He glanced at his daughter, who nodded encouragement. She used to say that love isn't just one thing. Some people show love by playing. Some people show love by working hard to give you a good home, good food, good schools. Both kinds of love are real, even if they feel different. Ruby's 4-year-old voice quivered. But we want her to play with us. We want her to love us the playing way. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She gripped the doorframe, suddenly unable to breathe properly. Dan met her eyes across the room, and she saw no judgment there, only a profound sadness that made her feel seen in a way she'd spent years avoiding. His voice stayed soft, addressing Ruby, but clearly speaking to Victoria too. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to play. They get scared and sad, and work feels safer than feelings. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. Sometimes it means they love you so much it hurts, and they don't know what to do with that hurt. Nora asked innocently, "Did Lily's mama forget how to play?" Dan's face clouded briefly. Lily's mama got very sick. She didn't forget to play. She just ran out of time to do it. That's why I try to play with Lily every single day now, because I learned that time is the most important thing we can give the people we love. Victoria turned and walked quickly back to her office before anyone could see the tears threatening to spill. She closed the door and pressed her palms against her desk, taking deep breaths. Who was this man? This cleaning man who saw through her so easily, who spoke about love and loss with such devastating clarity? She pulled out her phone and did something she never did during work hours. She searched for information about Cooper Home Services. The website was simple, professional, one-man operation it seemed, specializing in residential and small commercial spaces. References from satisfied clients praising his thoroughness and reliability. A small mention, family tradition, 3rd generation serving the Cleveland area before relocating east. Then she found a news article from 3 years ago. Local woman loses battle with cancer, leaves behind husband and young daughter. There was a photo. Dan Cooper, younger and devastated, holding a tiny 3-year-old girl at a funeral. The article mentioned that his wife, Rachel, had been a pediatric nurse at Riverside Medical Center. She died at 31. Victoria closed the browser, feeling like she'd invaded something private. But the pieces were falling into place. Dan Cooper was a widower, raising his daughter alone while building a business. He understood loss. He understood what it meant to keep going when everything fell apart. He understood her daughters because he'd lived through something that taught him how fragile everything really was. A knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. Dan's voice came through. "Mrs. Sterling, I've finished for today. I've left my invoice with your assistant's contact information. If you'd like me to return tomorrow to complete the upstairs, just let me know." Victoria opened the door, schooling her features back into professional neutrality. "Yes, please return tomorrow, same time." She paused, the words sticking in her throat before she forced them out. "Thank you for the cleaning, and for being kind to my daughters." Dan studied her face for a moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he could read every defense mechanism, every wall she'd built. "They're good kids, Mrs. Sterling. They're just testing boundaries because they don't know where the boundaries are. Kids need structure, but they also need to know the structure comes from love, not just rules." Victoria heard herself say, "I provide everything they need." But it sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Dan replied gently, "I'm sure you do. But sometimes what kids need most is to know they're more important than everything else, even if it's just for 10 minutes a day. He called for Lily, and the little girl came running, her backpack bouncing. Victoria's daughters appeared behind her, and she noticed something that made her chest tighten. They all looked disappointed that Dan was leaving. Isabel, her defiant, angry Isabel, actually looked like she might cry. Ruby tugged on Dan's work pants. "Will you come back?" He crouched down to her level. "If your mama wants me to, I'll be back tomorrow. And maybe, if it's okay with your mama, you can show me that drawing you were working on. I bet it's beautiful by now." Ruby beamed and nodded enthusiastically. Dan stood, gave Victoria a respectful nod, and headed for the door with Lily's hand in his. As the door closed behind them, Victoria's 5 daughters turned to look at her. For the first time in months, they weren't looking at her with resentment or indifference. They were looking at her with something worse. Hope. Hope that maybe she'd let Dan come back. Hope that maybe something in their lives might actually change. Victoria began, "Girls," but Isabel cut her off. "He's nice. He's nice, and he doesn't yell, and he doesn't cry, and he doesn't leave. Can he come back, please?" Victoria looked at her eldest daughter, seeing for the first time how much Isabel had taken on as the unofficial leader of her sisters. How much weight those small shoulders carried. How much anger was really just fear that everyone would eventually abandon them like their father had. "He's coming back tomorrow. He has more cleaning to do." Grace asked hopefully, "Just cleaning?" Victoria thought about Dan's words, about time being the most important thing you could give. She thought about her perfectly scheduled days, her back-to-back meetings, her empire built on 60-hour work weeks. She thought about 22 nannies who'd fled and 5 daughters who were crying out for something she'd convinced herself she couldn't provide. Just cleaning. Then, before she could stop herself, "But maybe after dinner we could watch a movie together. All of us." The shock on their faces would have been comical if it hadn't been so heartbreaking. Ruby recovered first, launching herself at Victoria's legs with such force she nearly knocked her over. "Really? You'll watch with us, not work?" Victoria awkwardly patted her youngest daughter's head, unused to physical affection from her children. "Really? I'll even let you pick the movie." The other 4 quickly joined the embrace, and Victoria found herself surrounded by small bodies and hopeful hearts. Over their heads, she caught her reflection in the hall mirror. She looked terrified. She was terrified. Terrified that she'd fail at this too. Terrified that one movie night wouldn't be enough. Terrified that she'd already broken something in her daughters that couldn't be fixed. But as Ruby looked up at her with those wide, trusting eyes, Victoria made a decision. She'd built a $2.1 billion company from nothing. Surely she could figure out how to be present for her own children. Dan Cooper had managed it while grieving his wife and building a business. If a man who'd lost everything could still show up for his daughter every day, what excuse did Victoria really have? That night, they watched Frozen for what had to be the 100th time in the movie's existence. Victoria's phone buzzed 17 times with work emergencies that she ignored. Her daughters sang along to every song, their voices off-key and perfect. And when Ruby fell asleep, curled against her side, Victoria realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd held one of her children like this. Couldn't remember the last time she'd felt needed for something other than money. As she carried Ruby to bed later, her daughter's sleepy voice whispered, "You smell like Mama today." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Like home. You smell like home." Victoria tucked her in, and for the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to cry. Not the angry tears of a woman betrayed by her husband, not the frustrated tears of a CEO with impossible demands, but the broken, healing tears of a mother who'd finally realized what she stood to lose. In her office later, she found Dan Cooper's invoice. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, he'd added a note. Your daughters talked about dragons today. Dragons are fierce and powerful, but the best ones learn when to breathe fire and when to shelter others under their wings. D.C. Victoria stared at the note for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and sent a message to Claire. Cancel my 9 a.m. tomorrow, and my 11 a.m. And actually, clear my entire morning. I have something more important to handle. For the first time in her career, Victoria Sterling was putting her children first. And it was terrifying. But watching Dan Cooper parent with such natural grace had shown her something she'd been denying. She wasn't too busy to be a good mother. She was too scared. Scared of failing. Scared of being vulnerable. Scared of letting anyone see that beneath her armor, she was just as lost as her daughters. Tomorrow Dan would return, and Victoria had questions. How did he do it? How did he work and parent and still have enough warmth left over for everyone? How did he make it look so easy when for her, it felt impossible? But mostly she wanted to know, could someone like her, someone who'd built walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore, could someone like her learn to tear them down before it was too late? She fell asleep at her desk that night, Dan's note still in her hand, and dreamed of dragons learning to shelter instead of burn. Dan Cooper arrived at the Sterling mansion at 9 a.m. sharp, Lily's hand in his as always. He'd expected to work quickly through the upstairs while Mrs. Sterling attended her morning meetings. What he didn't expect was to find Victoria Sterling herself opening the door, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer armor. Her voice sounded uncertain in her own entrance hall. Mr. Cooper, I've cleared my morning. I was hoping, that is, I thought maybe you could show me what you did yesterday with the girls, how you got them to listen. Dan studied the woman before him. Yesterday, she'd been all sharp edges and ice. Today, she looked younger, uncertain, almost vulnerable. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself for months after Rachel died, when he had no idea how to be both mother and father to a 3-year-old. Mrs. Sterling, she interrupted. Please, Mrs. Sterling is what the nannies call me before they quit. Call me Victoria. A small smile tugged at Dan's lips. Victoria, then. I didn't do anything magical yesterday. I just listened to them. Really listened. Kids know when you're actually paying attention versus when you're just waiting for them to stop talking. The admission clearly cost her. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to just be with them. I know how to provide for them, how to schedule their activities, how to ensure they have the best of everything. But sitting still and just being present, I'm terrible at it. Dan said simply, Then that's where we start. Being present is a skill like anything else. You weren't born knowing how to run a company, right? You learned. This is the same. Victoria let him in, and they found her 5 daughters eating breakfast at the kitchen table. Or rather, Isabel was trying to get Ruby to eat while the twins argued over the last waffle, and Nora spilled juice across the marble counter. It was controlled chaos, and Victoria looked ready to flee. Dan called out cheerfully, Hey there, my dragon friends. 5 heads swiveled toward him. The change was instant. Shoulders relaxed, arguing stopped. Even Ruby smiled with a mouthful of cereal. Remember what I said yesterday about dragons protecting what they love? Well, this kitchen is definitely something to protect. Who wants to help me show your mama how we can take care of it together? What happened next, Victoria would later describe to Claire as somewhere between a miracle and a military operation. Dan turned cleaning the breakfast mess into a game, assigning each girl a specific task matched to her age and ability. Ruby got to put napkins in the trash with Lily's help. Nora wiped down the lower cabinets. The twins took opposite ends of the table, and Isabel, the eldest, was given the important job of supervising her sisters and reporting to Dan if anyone needed help. But the real magic wasn't in the efficiency. It was in the way Dan made each girl feel valued. He praised specific actions. Nora, I love how you're making sure to get into the corners. That shows real attention to detail. He turned mistakes into learning. Oops, Grace? That's okay. Here's a trick my grandfather taught me about spills. Watch. And most importantly, he was patient. When Ruby got distracted 3 times, he simply redirected her gently without frustration. Ruby, Ruby, Ruby. Eyes on the mission. We're almost at the finish line. Victoria asked quietly, standing beside him as they watched the girls work. How do you not get angry? When they don't listen the first time, when they make mistakes, I just feel this rage building. Dan's eyes stayed on Lily, who was helping Ruby reach the trash can. The rage isn't about them. At least, it wasn't for me. He continued, his voice softening. After Rachel died, I was so angry at everything. Angry at the cancer, angry at God, angry at myself for not being enough. And Lily would do normal kid things, spill milk, forget her shoes, cry at bedtime, and I'd feel this fury rising, like I wanted to scream, why can't you just be easy? Haven't I lost enough? Victoria turned to look at him, shocked by his honesty. What did you do? I got help. A grief counselor who specialized in widowed parents. She taught me that anger is usually fear in disguise. I wasn't angry at Lily for spilling milk. I was terrified that I couldn't do this alone. Terrified I'd fail her. Terrified that losing her mother meant she'd lost stability forever. He paused, watching his daughter laugh at something Ruby said. Once I understood that, I could catch myself. When I felt the anger rising, I'd ask, what am I really afraid of right now? Victoria absorbed this, her mind working through the concept. What was she afraid of? Everything. Failing her daughters, proving her ex-husband right when he'd said she was incapable of real love, losing her company because she couldn't balance it all, being vulnerable and getting hurt. The list was endless. Ruby's voice broke through her thoughts. Mama, come see. We made the kitchen perfect. And it was. Not just clean, but organized in a way that made sense even for small children. Dan had rearranged the lower cabinets so the girls could reach dishes and cups, and he'd labeled bins with pictures for those who couldn't read yet. The whole space felt more like a home and less like a showroom. Victoria meant it when she said, "This is wonderful, girls. You all worked so hard." Isabel announced with 9-year-old authority, "Mr. Dan says working together is how families stay strong." Then, more tentatively, "Are we strong now, Mama?" The question hung in the air. Victoria felt Dan's eyes on her, but he didn't intervene. This was her moment, her answer to give. She looked at her 5 daughters, really looked at them, maybe for the first time in months. Isabel, with her defensive posture, always ready to protect her sisters, the twins with their elaborate secret language, bonding against a world that felt unsafe. Nora, with her creative chaos, desperately seeking attention. And Ruby, her baby, who just wanted to be held. Victoria knelt down, bringing herself to their eye level. It felt awkward, unnatural, but she forced herself to stay. I think we're getting stronger. We have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn. But I want us to be strong. I want us to be a real family. Grace asked hopefully, Does that mean you'll play with us more? Victoria promised, It means I'll try. I might not be good at it at first. I might mess up a lot. But I want to try. Will you help me learn? To her amazement, all 5 girls nodded. Even Isabel's skeptical expression softened slightly. Ruby launched herself into Victoria's arms with enough force to knock her backward, and soon all 5 daughters were piled on top of her on the kitchen floor, giggling and hugging and, for one perfect moment, happy. From above them, Dan's voice said warmly, That's what dragon families do. They pile up together in the den where it's safe and warm. Lily, do you remember? We do it every morning before school. Lily said proudly, Daddy says it's our charging station. We get hugs so we're ready for the day. Victoria looked up at Dan from beneath her pile of daughters, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps. He'd been where she was, lost in grief and fear and anger. He'd found his way out. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her find hers too. The rest of the morning passed in a way Victoria had never experienced. Dan cleaned, yes, but he also taught. He showed her how to turn ordinary tasks into bonding moments, how to listen not just to words, but to feelings, how to set boundaries with love instead of threats, how to let her daughters see her as human, not perfect. During lunch, which Dan insisted on making with the girls, Victoria watched him explain to Nora why we don't touch the hot stove. He didn't just say no. He explained that her job as a parent was to keep Nora safe, and the stove could hurt her, and if she got hurt, her mama would be sad. Nora actually listened. More than that, she seemed to appreciate being treated like someone capable of understanding. Victoria observed as they watched the girls eat their sandwiches at the table like civilized humans instead of the feral creatures she'd grown accustomed to. You're a natural teacher. Dan shrugged, wiping down the counter. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a dad who had to figure things out fast. When Rachel got sick, she made me promise I wouldn't let Lily grow up thinking love was complicated or hard. She said love should be the easiest thing in the world. You just show up, pay attention, and care more about their hearts than about looking like a good parent. Rachel sounds like she was an amazing woman. Dan's voice carried deep affection, but not the raw pain of fresh grief. She was. She spent her days as a pediatric nurse taking care of the tiniest, most fragile babies. She'd come home exhausted, but she always had energy for Lily. Always. He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. She used to say those babies taught her what love really was. They couldn't do anything for you, couldn't thank you or reward you or make you look good. You took care of them because they needed it, and that was enough. She said that's how we should love everyone, like they're precious just because they exist, not because of what they can do for us. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I've spent 2 years trying to prove I don't need anyone, that I'm enough all by myself, strong, independent, untouchable. Dan asked gently, And how's that working out? The whisper came broken. I built a $2 billion company and lost my family. So not great, Dan corrected, nodding toward her daughters. You haven't lost them yet. They're right here, still hoping, still waiting. Kids are incredibly resilient, Victoria. They forgive so much more than adults do. The question is, can you forgive yourself enough to try again? Before Victoria could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her CFO, probably with an emergency that absolutely required her attention. Her hand moved toward the phone automatically, 2 years of conditioning making the decision for her. Then she stopped. She looked at her daughters, happily eating lunch and chattering with Lily about favorite colors. She looked at Dan, who was watching her with understanding, not judgment. And she made a choice. She declined the call and turned off her phone completely. Her voice shook with emotion. Mr. Cooper, I'd like to modify our arrangement. I don't just need cleaning services. I need help with everything. I need someone to show me how to be the mother my daughters deserve. I know that's not what you signed up for, and I'll pay you whatever rate you— Dan held up a hand, stopping her. This isn't about money, Victoria. This is about whether I have the time and whether it's the right thing for everyone involved. Lily and I have our routine, our life. I can't just— Victoria said quickly, feeling foolish. I understand. I shouldn't have assumed. I'm sorry. Dan said with a slight smile. Let me finish. I was going to say I can't just agree without thinking about Lily. He looked at his daughter, who was teaching Ruby how to fold her napkin into a butterfly shape. But Lily loves being around other kids. And honestly, since Rachel died, I've been so focused on making sure Lily doesn't feel the loss that I haven't given her much chance to just be a kid around other children. Maybe this could be good for both our families. Victoria's breath caught. Really? You'd consider it? On one condition. This isn't about me fixing your family while you watch. This is about me helping you learn to connect with your daughters. It'll be uncomfortable. You'll make mistakes. There will be moments when you want to run back to your office and hide behind your work. But if you commit to this, really commit, then yes, I'll help. Victoria said immediately, I commit. Then she caught herself. I want to commit. I'm terrified I'll fail, but I want to try. Dan replied, That's all anyone can ask. Fear is normal. Rachel used to tell her NICU parents that fear meant they cared enough to worry about doing it right. It's the people who aren't scared who should worry. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, something Victoria couldn't remember doing in months. Dan showed her how to play with her daughters, really play, not just supervise. They built an obstacle course using pool noodles and hula hoops. They had relay races where Dan made sure to handicap himself and Victoria so the younger girls could win sometimes. They played a game he called emotion charades, where the girls had to act out feelings and everyone had to guess. A sneaky way, Victoria realized, to teach emotional vocabulary. By 4 o'clock, all 6 girls were exhausted and happy, sprawled on a blanket under the large oak tree in the corner of the yard. Victoria sat with them, Ruby asleep with her head in Victoria's lap, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She said quietly to Dan, who was sitting nearby with Lily drowsing against his shoulder, Thank you. Not just for today, for seeing past my armor, for being kind when you could have been judgmental. Dan was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? Yesterday, when I first arrived and saw your daughters acting out, I didn't see bad kids. I saw my Lily about 6 months after Rachel died. Angry, testing every boundary, trying to make sense of a world that had betrayed her. Your daughters aren't misbehaving because they're bad. They're trying to figure out if you're going to abandon them too. Victoria protested. But I haven't abandoned them. I'm right here. I've always been here. Physically, yes. But Victoria, there's a difference between being present and being available. I learned that the hard way. He shifted slightly, careful not to wake Lily. After the funeral, I threw myself into building the business. Told myself I was doing it for Lily, to secure her future. But really, I was hiding. Work was easier than grief. Clients were easier than a crying 3-year-old asking why mommy wasn't coming home. What changed? Lily started having nightmares. Every single night, screaming for her mother. The pediatrician said she was processing trauma, but that my emotional unavailability was making it worse. She needed to know I wasn't going anywhere, that I was solid, present, hers. Dan's voice grew thick with emotion. The doctor told me something I'll never forget. Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. They need someone who shows up even when it's hard, even when they don't know what to do. The showing up is what matters. Victoria said softly, "So you started showing up?" Every day, even when I was exhausted, even when my grief was so heavy I could barely breathe, even when I had no idea what I was doing. I showed up. I read to her even when my voice cracked on every word. I held her during nightmares, even when it broke my heart. I played even when I wanted to crawl into bed and not wake up. And slowly, over months, Lily started to heal. And so did I. Victoria looked down at Ruby, at her other daughters sleeping peacefully for the first time in recent memory. I've been so angry at David for leaving, for choosing his secretary over his family, for abandoning these beautiful girls. But I abandoned them too, didn't I? In a different way. Dan said firmly, "You're here now. That's what counts. Not yesterday, not last year. Now. This moment. This choice." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the yard, Victoria made a decision. She pulled out her phone and composed an email to her executive team. Effective immediately, I'm restructuring my schedule. No meetings before 9:30 a.m. or after 3 p.m. on weekdays. No work on weekends unless emergency. Promote Gerald to COO to handle day-to-day operations. I hired talented people for a reason. It's time I trusted them to do their jobs. She showed the email to Dan before sending it. Is this crazy? Am I about to tank my company? He corrected. You're about to save your family. The company will be fine. Companies always are. But your daughters? They get one childhood, one chance to know their mother loves them more than anything else. Don't waste it. Victoria hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she woke her daughters gently. Girls, how would you feel about having Mr. Cooper and Lily come here every day for a while, not as our housekeeper, but as our teachers, to help us learn to be a better family? 5 sleepy faces looked up at her with such hope it physically hurt. Isabel, always the skeptic, asked, Every day? Really? You won't cancel because of work? Victoria promised. You are my most important job. I forgot that for a while, but I won't forget again. What happened next surprised everyone, including Victoria herself. Isabel started crying, not angry tears, but relieved ones. The 8-year-old sobbed, I thought you didn't love us anymore. I thought you were sorry Daddy left us with you. I thought we were too much trouble. Victoria gathered her eldest daughter into her arms, and then all 5 girls were crying, and Victoria was crying, and even Dan had to wipe his eyes. Years of pain and fear and loneliness poured out on that blanket under the oak tree. And for the first time, Victoria didn't try to stop it, or fix it, or make it go away. She just held her daughters and let them feel what they needed to feel. She whispered fiercely, I love you. I love you so much it scares me. I'm sorry I've been so bad at showing it. I'm sorry I made you doubt it. But I love you more than any company, any career, any amount of money. You are everything. Lily, watching this with her wise 6-year-old eyes, leaned over to her father and whispered loudly, "Daddy, are they going to be okay now?" Dan smiled through his own tears. "Yeah, baby girl. I think they're going to be just fine." 3 weeks passed, and the Sterling household transformed into something Victoria barely recognized. A home filled with laughter instead of chaos. Dan came every morning at 9, and together they created routines that actually worked. Breakfast became family time. Bedtime meant individual moments with each daughter. Weekends were sacred. No work, just connection. Victoria's board questioned her new schedule. Her CFO, Gerald, handled it beautifully, proving Dan right. She'd hired talented people who could manage without her hovering. The company thrived. More importantly, so did her daughters. But something else was happening too, something Victoria tried desperately to ignore. She was falling for Dan Cooper. It wasn't just gratitude, though she was grateful beyond measure. It was the way he listened when she talked about her fears, the way he made her laugh when she took herself too seriously, the way he looked at his daughter with such pure love that Victoria ached with longing, not for him, but to be loved like that herself. She caught herself watching him more than necessary, noticed when he changed his work shirt, found excuses to be in whatever room he occupied. It was ridiculous, inappropriate. He was technically her employee, though she'd stopped paying him for cleaning weeks ago and started paying him as a consultant. And more than that, he was still grieving his wife. Dan's voice broke through her thoughts. "Earth to Victoria!" They were in the garden while the girls played on the swing set. "You okay? You've been staring at that rose bush for 5 minutes." Victoria said quickly, "Just thinking about how much has changed." Dan smiled, that warm expression that made her heart do stupid things. "You've done incredible work. Your daughters are thriving. Isabel hasn't had a single outburst in 2 weeks. The twins are more confident. Nora's creativity has an outlet now. And Ruby—" He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Ruby's special, isn't she?" "What do you mean?" "She sees things other kids don't. Emotional things. Yesterday she told me Lily was sad because she missed her mother, even though Lily was smiling. She was right, it was Rachel's birthday." His voice carried wonder. "Your 4-year-old has emotional intelligence beyond her years." Victoria felt pride swell. She's always been perceptive. Sometimes it worries me, like she carries too much for someone so small. Dan suggested, or maybe she's exactly who she's meant to be. Rachel used to say, some souls are old. They come into this world already knowing things the rest of us have to learn. They fell into comfortable silence, watching their daughters play together. 6 girls who'd become inseparable. Victoria couldn't imagine life without Lily's gentle presence anymore. The thought made her chest tighten. Victoria began hesitantly. "Dan, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about, has there been anyone since Rachel? Anyone you've—" Ruby's scream cut through the air like a knife. Victoria's blood turned to ice. She ran toward the swing set where Ruby stood pointing at Lily, who was on the ground, not moving. Dan reached her first, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. "Lily, baby, can you hear me?" Lily's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Daddy, I feel funny. Everything's spinning." Dan's voice cracked with terror. Call 911. Victoria already had her phone out, her hands shaking as she dialed. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes that felt like hours. Dan rode with Lily, and Victoria followed in her car with all 5 girls crowded in the back, crying. At the hospital, they were separated. Dan went with Lily to the emergency room, while Victoria tried to keep 5 terrified children calm in the waiting area. Lily's small voice echoed in Victoria's mind as Ruby's tear-streaked face looked up at her. Is Lily going to die? Victoria prayed she wasn't lying. No, sweetheart. The doctors are helping her. Hours passed. Victoria's daughters eventually fell asleep in the uncomfortable chairs, but she stayed alert, watching the emergency room doors. Finally, at 11 p.m., Dan emerged. He looked destroyed. He said immediately, seeing Victoria's face, "She's stable. They're running tests. They think it might be." His voice broke. "They think it might be something genetic. A heart condition. If it is, Lily will need treatment, possibly surgery. And it's expensive. My insurance covers some, but not enough." Victoria stood, careful not to wake her daughters. She took Dan's hands in hers. "Whatever it costs, I'll cover it. All of it. Don't even think about money." "Victoria, I can't." "Yes, you can. You saved my family, Dan. Let me help save yours. Please." Dan pulled her into a hug, and Victoria melted into it. He smelled like fear and hospitals and something uniquely him. She wanted to hold him forever, to take away his pain, to promise everything would be okay. When they pulled apart, something had shifted between them. Dan looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. His whisper came rough. "Thank you." But Victoria saw something else in his eyes, too. Something that looked like guilt. And she wondered what secrets Dan Cooper was still keeping. Lily's tests came back 3 days later. Victoria sat beside Dan in the doctor's office, her hand in his, because he was shaking, and someone needed to anchor him to earth. Dr. Patel said, and Dan sagged with relief, "It's not the same condition her mother had." Then came the challenging news. "But Lily does have a congenital heart defect that requires surgery. The good news is it's correctable. The challenging news is we need a detailed family medical history, particularly maternal side." Dan went pale. "Her mother's dead. I don't have access to those records." The doctor said firmly, "We'll need them. There are genetic factors that could impact the surgery and recovery. Is there any way to contact her mother's family?" Dan said too quickly, "No. No family. Rachel was... she was alone." Victoria noticed his discomfort, but didn't press. Not here, not now. Later, at Victoria's house, while Lily rested upstairs with the girls watching over her, Victoria made coffee and gathered her courage. "Dan, what aren't you telling me?" He stared into his cup for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Rachel wasn't Lily's biological mother. Victoria's world tilted. "What?" "We adopted Lily when she was 2 days old. Private adoption. Rachel was her mother in every way that mattered. She loved her, raised her, would have died for her. But biologically..." He looked up, his eyes tortured. "I don't know Lily's medical history because I don't know who her birth parents were. It was a closed adoption. The agency sealed all records." "Can you unseal them for medical reasons?" "I've been trying for 3 days. The agency is dragging their feet. Something about privacy laws and consent. His hands clenched into fists. My daughter needs surgery, and I can't give the doctors the information they need to keep her safe. Victoria's mind raced. What agency? New Beginnings Adoption Services, Columbus, Ohio. Something clicked in Victoria's memory. A conversation years ago before her marriage fell apart. David had mentioned something about his sister using an adoption agency in Ohio. But David's sister Sarah had died years before Victoria met him. Died in childbirth, he'd said. Or no, it couldn't be. Victoria's voice came strange even to her own ears. Dan, when exactly did you adopt Lily? September 15th, 6 years ago. Why? Victoria's hands went numb. September 15th, 6 years ago. The same month Sarah supposedly died. But what if she hadn't died in childbirth? What if she'd given up a baby instead? I need to make a call. Stay here. She went to her office and pulled out the box of David's things she'd kept. Papers from the divorce, old photos, documents. Buried at the bottom was a memorial card. Sarah Mitchell, beloved sister, 1992 to 2018. But attached to it, hidden behind, was something else. Not a birth certificate, just a handwritten note in David's familiar scrawl. New Beginnings handled it. September 2017. Sarah made me promise never to tell anyone, especially not Victoria. The baby is better off. D. Victoria's world exploded. She did the math fast. Sarah died January 2018, 4 months after September 2017. Not in childbirth. After. And if Sarah had given birth in September, Lily was born September 2017. Adopted, 2 days old. Victoria walked back to the kitchen on numb legs. Dan looked up, concerned. Victoria, you're white as a sheet. The whisper came broken. I think I know who Lily's birth mother was. And Dan? This changes everything. The truth spilled out in Victoria's kitchen while their daughters slept upstairs, innocent to the revelation shattering the adult's world. Victoria showed Dan the note, explained about Sarah, David's sister who'd lived in Columbus, who died by suicide in January 2018, 4 months after giving birth. Sarah had gotten pregnant at 25 by a man who'd abandoned her. Ashamed, hiding from their wealthy, judgmental family, she'd gone to Ohio to have the baby in secret. She'd chosen closed adoption, made David promise never to tell anyone, especially not Victoria, whom Sarah had only met once at the wedding. Sarah had died by suicide. The guilt of giving up her daughter had consumed her. Dan's voice came hollow. David knew. He knew Lily existed, knew where she was, and he never said anything. Victoria said bitterly, David kept everything that mattered secret. He probably thought if I knew Lily existed, I'd want to find her, want to be involved. He couldn't stand anything that might complicate his perfect, controlled life. Her voice broke on the realization. Dan, Lily is my daughter's cousin. She's family, real family, and she's been here all along. Dan stood abruptly, pacing. This is insane. What are the odds? Out of every house in this city, I end up at yours. Victoria said softly, maybe it wasn't odds. Maybe it was meant to be. You said Rachel made you promise to help struggling families. What if this was always where you were supposed to end up? With us? Dan stopped pacing, turning to face her. What are you saying? I'm saying Lily needs her medical history. Now we can give it to her. David came from a family with detailed health records. His mother was obsessed with documenting everything. I can get them. She paused. But more than that, Dan, Lily deserves to know she has family. Real family, who loves her. What about David? He's their father. What do I tell him? Victoria's expression hardened. David abandoned his daughters. He doesn't get a say anymore. But his family medical history could save Lily's life. That's what matters. Over the next week, Victoria obtained the Mitchell family medical records through her lawyer. The doctors found what they needed: a genetic marker that required adjusted surgical protocol. Nothing life-threatening, but essential to know. The surgery was scheduled, and Victoria paid for everything without hesitation. Because Lily wasn't just Dan's daughter anymore. She was family. The night before Lily's surgery, Victoria gathered all 6 girls in the living room. She began, Dan beside her. "We need to tell you something important." They explained it simply. Lily's birth mother was a woman named Sarah, who was related to their family. Lily and Victoria's daughters were cousins. They'd found each other by accident, or maybe by fate. But now they knew the truth. Ruby spoke first, her 4-year-old wisdom shining through. "So Lily is our sister now? Like forever?" Victoria said carefully, "She's your cousin, but if you want to think of her as a sister, that's beautiful." Isabel declared, and all the other girls nodded. "I want it." Grace and Hannah, the twins, asked in near unison, "So we're all family now? Like a real family?" "Yes, we're all family." Lily started crying, happy tears, as she looked from her father to Victoria to the 5 girls. "I always wanted sisters and cousins and a big family like in movies." All 6 girls erupted into a group hug, crying and laughing, and Victoria and Dan stood apart, watching, both overwhelmed. Victoria whispered, "Out of every house in this city, you ended up at mine. That can't be coincidence." Dan's reply came soft. "Rachel used to say God puts people where they need to be. Maybe she was right." The surgery came 3 days later. Dan was a wreck, unable to sit still in the waiting room. Victoria stayed with him the entire 8 hours, her 5 girls video calling every hour from Jennifer's house for updates. Dan paced endlessly until Victoria caught his hand. "I keep thinking about Rachel. She should be here for this. Lily needs her." Victoria's voice stayed steady. "Lily has you, and she has us. We're not replacing Rachel. We're honoring her by loving Lily the way she would." Dan looked at her. Really looked. "You're incredible, you know that? I'm just showing up. You taught me that." Dr. Patel emerged after the longest 8 hours of their lives. "Everything went perfectly. Lily's recovery should be textbook." 3 days post-surgery, Lily was in her hospital room surrounded by all 6 girls who'd practically moved in. The hospital had bent the rules, charmed by the sight of 5 sisters who refused to leave their cousin's side. The girls had made a recovery fort with blankets drawn on Lily's cast, told stories to pass the time. Victoria and Dan watched from the doorway, neither wanting to interrupt the magic. Dan's voice carried quiet awe. "This is what family looks like. What I always wanted for Lily. What I didn't know I wanted for my girls. They're different now. Happy." A long pause stretched between them before Dan asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." When Ruby asked if I was going to be their new dad, what did you think? Victoria's breath caught. "I thought it was terrifying and impossible. and everything I didn't know I wanted. Dan turned to face her fully. Rachel made me promise something before she died. She said if I ever found someone who loved Lily as much as I did, someone who made our family bigger instead of replacing her, I should let myself be happy. She didn't want me alone forever. The question came soft. Have you found someone? Dan stepped closer. Yes. She's brilliant and scared and learning to be vulnerable. She makes me want to be brave again. Victoria's confession rushed out. I love you. I've been falling in love with you for weeks. I know it's complicated. You're grieving, I'm a mess, we have 6 kids between us. But Dan, I love you. Dan cupped her face in his hands. I love you too. And it's not complicated. It's exactly right. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like every broken piece of both their lives had been leading to this moment, this choice, this beautiful, impossible, meant-to-be love. A chorus of giggles erupted from the hospital room. All 6 girls had definitely been watching. Ruby squealed loudest. I knew it! Mr. Dan is going to be our daddy! Lily called from her hospital bed. Does this mean you're my Aunt Victoria for real now? Isabel asked, skeptical but hopeful. Are you guys getting married? Dan and Victoria laughed, overwhelmed by 6 expectant faces. Victoria said, trying for calm, We're together. That's all we know right now. Is everyone okay with that? 6 enthusiastic yeses rang out. Nora asked, Can we all live together? Like a real family? Dan looked at Victoria, the question hanging between them. That's a lot to figure out. But maybe, eventually? Eventually sounds perfect. A week later, Lily was discharged and recovering beautifully at Victoria's house. Dan and Lily had temporarily moved in for recovery, though everyone knew it was becoming permanent. The transition felt natural, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Early one morning, Victoria and Dan sat in the kitchen drinking coffee while the girls still slept. They'd fallen into this routine, stolen moments before chaos began, planning their day, talking about everything and nothing. Dan asked with a slight smile, So, do we date? With 6 kids watching? I think we co-parent and see where it goes. No pressure, just being together. I like that. Slow and steady. Victoria's phone rang. Claire, her assistant. She answered on speaker. Tori, the board meeting today. Keller's motion to remove you as CEO? Victoria had actually forgotten in the chaos of Lily's recovery. Oh God, that's today. Claire's voice carried satisfaction. Already handled. Gerald presented Q2 numbers, up 23%. Your new structure is working better than the old one. Keller withdrew his motion. You're safe. Victoria felt relief flood through her. I wasn't even worried. That's new. Dan observed after she hung up. That's growth. You trust your team now. They discussed real logistics then, Dan selling his apartment, officially moving in with separate bedrooms for propriety's sake, combining families fully with shared rules and responsibilities. Dan keeping his business, Victoria keeping her CEO role but balanced. Marriage eventually? Both wanted it, but agreed to wait at least 6 months. We need to get this right, Victoria said. For them. Dan agreed. For all of us. The morning routine shattered when all 6 girls thundered downstairs demanding pancakes. The kitchen erupted into controlled chaos, flour everywhere, Lily directing operations from her chair like a tiny general, Ruby somehow managing to get batter in her hair. Victoria found herself laughing, truly laughing, as Nora flipped a pancake that landed on the floor. Old Victoria would have panicked. New Victoria just grabbed a towel. Storms happen. Here's how we clean up our storms together. Dan caught her eye and grinned, that expression that made her heart skip. You've been listening. I had a good teacher. The 6 girls started chanting, Group hug! Group hug! All 8 of them piled together in the middle of the kitchen, sticky with batter and syrup and love, laughing until they couldn't breathe. This was family. This was home. This was everything Victoria had been too scared to want. But the peace couldn't last forever. 2 weeks after Lily's surgery, Victoria received a call that sent ice through her veins. David's voice came through the phone, hesitant and unfamiliar after 2 years of silence. Victoria, we need to talk. About Sarah. About the adoption. Her hand tightened on the phone. How did you find out? My lawyer called. Said you'd requested Sarah's medical records for a child named Lily Cooper. I put it together. Is the girl Sarah's daughter? Victoria walked out to the garden where the girls couldn't hear. Yes. And she's been living in my house for the past month. Your daughters know. They love her. She's their cousin and they treat her like a sister. David's silence stretched long before he spoke again. I never thought. I promised Sarah I'd never interfere. She was so adamant about the closed adoption. She said the baby deserved better than our family. Sarah killed herself 4 months after giving birth, David. Did you know that? The guilt destroyed her. His sharp intake of breath told her he hadn't. I knew she died. I didn't know it was... God, I should have checked on her. I should have... You should have told me. Your niece has been out there alone, and you knew. You could have helped her, could have made sure she was okay, but you kept your promise to a dead woman instead of doing what was right. David's voice broke. What do you want from me, Victoria? Nothing. I'm telling you so you know that Lily is safe, loved, and surrounded by family now. The ending Sarah would have wanted if she'd been brave enough to choose it. A pause, then David asked tentatively, Can I meet her? Lily? Victoria considered this carefully. Maybe. Someday. When she's ready. But David, you abandoned your daughters. You don't get to walk back into their lives or Lily's without earning it first. I understand. Thank you for telling me. After she hung up, Victoria stood in the garden for a long moment. Dan found her there, worry creasing his features. Everything okay? David knows about Lily. He wants to meet her. Dan's jaw tightened. What did you tell him? That he'd have to earn it. That he doesn't just get to show up and play uncle after abandoning his kids. Dan pulled her close. Good. Lily doesn't need him. She has us. Victoria leaned into his strength. She has all of us. 3 months passed in a blur of normalcy that felt like a miracle. Dan and Lily officially moved in. The house settled into rhythms that actually worked. Morning pancakes, afternoon homework at the big dining table, evening walks around the neighborhood with all 8 of them. Victoria's company continued to thrive under her new structure. Gerald proved himself invaluable as COO, and the board stopped questioning her schedule when profits kept climbing. Dan's business expanded too. He hired 2 assistants and started specializing in what he called second chance home services, helping other single parents and struggling families get their houses in order. Word spread. His calendar filled months in advance. The 6 girls flourished. Isabel made student council and started a club for kids from divorced families. The twins joined the art program at school, their work displayed in the hallway. Nora won a district-wide poster contest. Ruby started kindergarten and immediately became the class emotional counselor. Lily returned to soccer, her scar barely visible, her smile brighter than ever. And Victoria learned to be present, really present. She still worked, still ran her company, but she did it from 9:30 to 3. And when she was with her family, she was actually there, mind, body, and heart. One Thursday evening, Victoria attended the single parent support group that Jennifer had first invited her to months ago. She'd kept going, finding solace in the shared struggles and victories. Tonight, she brought Dan. Jennifer welcomed them warmly. "Everyone, this is Dan, Victoria's partner." The group applauded, and several members came up to shake Dan's hand and share their own stories of finding love after loss. One new member, Aaron, 32, recently widowed with a toddler, looked completely overwhelmed. "I don't know how you all do this. How do you parent alone and work and not fall apart?" Dan and Victoria exchanged a look before Dan spoke, his words echoing what he'd once told Victoria. "You don't need to be perfect. You need to be present. Show up scared and do it anyway." Aaron's voice cracked. "But what if I fail?" Victoria answered, surprising herself with her own certainty. "You will fail. A lot. But kids don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. They need someone who keeps trying even when it's hard." After the meeting, walking to their cars with Jennifer, Dan observed, "We've come full circle. We're the ones helping now." Victoria agreed. "Feels right. Like we're paying forward what we received." December arrived with the first real snow, and the house transformed into something from a holiday movie. All 6 girls insisted on decorating every surface, and for once, Victoria said yes to everything. The 18-foot tree, the lights on every bush, the inflatable snowman family on the front lawn. On Christmas Eve, after the girls finally fell asleep, Dan and Victoria sat by the fireplace in the living room. The tree lights cast warm shadows across the room, and everything felt perfect in a way Victoria had stopped believing was possible. Dan pulled out a small box, but he didn't open it right away. "Victoria, 6 months ago I told you we'd go slow. And we have. But I know what I want." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "I want forever with you. I want to officially be a family, all 8 of us. Will you marry me?" Victoria was already crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes! 1,000 times yes!" They kissed, and somewhere above them, floorboards creaked. They looked up to find all 6 girls sitting on the stairs in their pajamas, watching with huge grins. Ruby's whisper carried clearly, "I told you he'd be our daddy." Isabel tried to look stern, but couldn't hide her smile. "Did you know this whole time?" Dan admitted with a grin, "Maybe I asked your sisters for permission first." The girls swarmed them, and the house filled with happy chaos and plans for a wedding and 6 flower girls arguing over dress colors. Later, after everyone finally went back to bed, Victoria and Dan stood at the window, watching snow fall over their neighborhood. Dan's voice carried quiet wonder. "A year ago, I was alone. Just Lily and me, trying to make it through each day. I never thought I'd feel this again." Victoria leaned against him. "A year ago, I was drowning and didn't even know it. My daughters hated me. I hated myself. And then you showed up to clean my house." Best emergency call I ever took. Best broken vase I ever didn't clean up. They stood there in comfortable silence until Victoria asked the question that had been nagging at her. Do you ever feel guilty? About being happy again? About moving on from Rachel? Dan took a moment before answering. Sometimes. But then I remember what she said, that she wanted me to find someone who made our family bigger, not smaller. Someone who loved Lily like their own. And when I see you with Lily, when I see all 6 girls together, I know Rachel would be happy. This is what she wanted for us. His voice grew softer. Love doesn't replace love, Victoria. It multiplies. Rachel will always be part of my heart, but you've shown me my heart is big enough for both past and future. Victoria turned to face him. I want you to talk about her. To Lily, to our girls, to me. I want them to know about the woman who made you who you are. I want them to understand that love doesn't end just because someone dies. Dan kissed her forehead. You're going to be an amazing stepmother. We're going to be an amazing family. As spring arrived, wedding planning kicked into high gear. Victoria initially wanted something small and simple, but 6 excited girls had other ideas. Somehow the small garden wedding evolved into an event with 50 guests, a string quartet, and an elaborate dessert table that Ruby had designed down to the last cupcake. The girls threw themselves into preparations with infectious enthusiasm. Isabel took charge of coordinating the flower girls' dresses. The twins created handmade invitations. Nora designed the ceremony program. Ruby and Lily worked together on centerpieces, their heads bent close over ribbons and flowers. Watching them work together, Victoria felt her heart swell. They weren't just cousins anymore. They were sisters in every way that mattered. 2 weeks before the wedding, Victoria made a decision. She called David. His surprise was evident. Victoria, I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm getting married. To Dan, Lily's adoptive father. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Silence, then. Congratulations, that's wonderful. Victoria took a breath. The girls want you there. Not me, I could live my whole life never seeing you again. But Isabel asked why her daddy wasn't coming to the wedding, and I realized I can't punish them for your mistakes. David's voice roughened with emotion. I don't deserve. You don't. But they do. They deserve a father who shows up, even if it's late, even if it's hard. So I'm inviting you. But David, if you come as their guest, not mine. You sit where they want you to sit. You leave when they're done with you. This is their day, not yours. I understand. Thank you. I'll be there. After hanging up, Victoria found Dan in the kitchen making lunch for the girls. She told him about the call, and his expression grew serious. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm sure about giving my daughters the chance to have their father back in their lives, if he's willing to do the work. And I'm sure that Lily deserves to meet her uncle, if she wants to. Dan pulled her close. You're a better person than I am. You taught me how to be. The wedding day arrived with perfect June weather, sunny but not hot, with a gentle breeze that made the garden decorations dance. Victoria stood in her childhood bedroom, now transformed into a bridal suite, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her dress was simple and elegant, ivory silk that fell in soft waves. No veil, she'd never been one for traditional bride accessories, but pinned to her dress was a small locket that Isabel had given her that morning, containing a photo of all 6 girls. A knock came at the door, and Jennifer entered with the flower girls.
All 6 of them wore lavender dresses and carried bouquets of wildflowers. Lily's scar was visible on her chest, and she wore it with pride, refusing to cover it with makeup or accessories. Isabel spoke for all of them. "Mom, you look beautiful." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You all look stunning." Ruby bounced with excitement. "Can we start? I want to throw flowers." Nora corrected primly. "It's not throwing, it's scattering. There's a difference." The twins giggled, and Lily squeezed between them to grab both their hands. Victoria took in the sight of her 6 daughters, 5 by birth, 1 by fate, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them all together. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion.
Victoria walked down the aisle alone, by choice. No one gave her away because she was choosing this herself. The 6 flower girls preceded her, scattering petals with varying degrees of precision, and the sight of them made half the guests tear up. Dan waited at the altar with Lily beside him as his best girl, and when his eyes met Victoria's, she saw everything she needed to know reflected there: love, commitment, hope, and home. They'd written their own vows, and Dan spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion Victoria could see in his eyes. "Victoria, you taught me that love doesn't replace love, it multiplies. Rachel will always be part of my heart, but you've shown me my heart is big enough for both past and future. You've given Lily sisters, given me a partner, and given all of us a family. I promise to show up every day, scared or not, and choose us. Always us." Victoria's turn came, and she took a breath before speaking. "Dan, you saw past my walls when I didn't know I wanted them down. You taught me that presence is the greatest gift, that vulnerability is strength, and that family isn't perfect, it's real. I promise to keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing connection over control. I promise to love Lily as fiercely as I love my daughters, because she is my daughter now. And I promise to love you with all the courage I can find." The officiant pronounced them married, and as they kissed, 6 girls cheered louder than all 50 guests combined. The reception was held in the same garden, under a tent strung with lights that would glow as evening fell. During the cocktail hour, an elderly woman approached Victoria. Her voice was gentle. "Mrs. Sterling? I'm Margaret Torres. I was a NICU nurse at Riverside Medical years ago." Victoria smiled politely but confused. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met."
Margaret continued.
"No, but I met your husband, Dan. When his wife Rachel was dying in the oncology wing, I was on break and saw him in the hallway struggling with Lily. She was 3, crying for her mama. I spent 20 minutes showing him how to comfort her, gave him resources for grief counseling." Dan appeared at Victoria's elbow, having overheard. "Wait, you were that nurse? I never got your name. You changed everything for us." Margaret's smile was warm. "Rachel was in my prayers every day after that. I'm so glad to see you found happiness again." Dan's voice roughened. "You have no idea what that 20 minutes meant. I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline." Margaret patted his hand. "We all need lifelines sometimes. That's what we're here for, to help each other through the storms." After she walked away, Dan turned to Victoria with wonder in his eyes. "See? Rachel sent angels all along, including you." Victoria squeezed his hand. "We send them to each other. That's how it works." The reception continued with toasts and dancing, and 6 flower girls who monopolized the dance floor. David showed up as promised, sitting quietly in the back until Isabel spotted him and dragged him forward to meet Lily. Victoria watched from a distance as her ex-husband knelt down to talk to his niece. She couldn't hear what they said, but she saw Lily's tentative smile, saw David's eyes fill with tears, saw Isabel's protective stance as she monitored the interaction. Dan came up behind her. "You okay with this?" "I'm okay with giving everyone a chance to heal, including him." As the sun set and the lights came on, turning the garden magical, Victoria found herself surrounded by everyone she loved. Her daughters, her new daughter, her husband, her friends from the support group, her executive team who'd become family in their own right. This was what she'd built. Not a billion-dollar company, though she had that too, but this messy, beautiful, imperfect family that chose each other every single day. Ruby tugged on her dress. "Mama, dance with us!" Victoria let herself be pulled onto the dance floor, where all 6 girls and Dan formed a circle. They danced without skill or grace, just joy, and Victoria laughed until she couldn't breathe. Someone had to love her first, before she could learn to love herself. These 7 people, 6 girls and 1 patient man, had done that work, and now she finally understood what home felt like. 2 years after the wedding, Victoria stood in her kitchen on a Sunday morning, watching controlled chaos unfold with a sense of peace she'd never imagined possible. Flour dusted every surface as all 6 girls attempted to make pancakes simultaneously. Ruby, now 6.5, had somehow gotten batter in her hair again. Lily, nearly 9, directed operations with the calm authority of a seasoned general. The twins argued good-naturedly about whether chocolate chips or blueberries made superior pancakes, while Nora sketched designs for pancake art in her notebook. Isabel, now 11, supervised her younger sisters with the patience Victoria herself had learned from Dan. Dan came up behind Victoria, wrapping his arms around her waist. Another successful Sunday morning disaster. She leaned back into him. Our favorite kind. The Sterling Cooper household had found its rhythm over the past 2 years. A beautiful, messy symphony of 8 people learning to live as one family. Dan's business continued to thrive, now employing 5 people and specializing in helping families in transition. Victoria's company had grown another 40% under her balanced leadership style, proving that presence didn't mean weakness and boundaries didn't mean failure. But more than professional success, they'd built something neither had thought possible after their losses. A home filled with laughter, safety, and unconditional love. Ruby's voice cut through the kitchen noise. "Mama, the batter's escaping!" Indeed, a bowl was tipping dangerously close to the edge of the counter. Victoria moved quickly, catching it just in time. Old Victoria would have scolded the carelessness. New Victoria just grabbed a towel and started cleaning. "Remember what we learned about gravity and bowl placement?" Ruby giggled. "Gravity always wins?" Exactly, which is why we put bowls in the middle of the counter, not the edge. The simple teaching moment, no anger, no frustration, just gentle redirection, still felt like a miracle even after 2 years of practice. Dan caught her eye across the kitchen and smiled that smile that still made her heart skip. They'd come so far from that first day when he'd shown up to clean her house and found 5 feral children and 1 broken woman trying desperately to hold everything together through sheer force of will. Nora's pancake slipped off the spatula and landed on the floor with a wet splat. The 6-year-old's face crumpled, tears already forming. "I ruined it!" Victoria knelt down beside her. "Hey, storms happen. Do you remember what we do with storms?" Nora sniffled. We cleaned them up together? That's right. Here, I'll get the towel, you get the spray. Teamwork. Crisis averted, lesson learned, connection maintained. These small moments added up to something bigger. A childhood where mistakes were learning opportunities instead of catastrophes, where feelings were valid instead of inconvenient, where love was shown through presence instead of presence. After breakfast was consumed and the kitchen restored to relative order, Dan suggested a family walk around the neighborhood.
The weather was perfect. Early September, still warm but with a hint of autumn in the air. All 8 of them set out together, a small parade of happiness that made their neighbors smile. Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down stopped them. I just love seeing your family. You've got something special there. Victoria thanked her, and as they walked on, Dan's hand found hers. We do have something special, don't we? We really do. Lily ran ahead with the twins, their laughter carrying back. Isabel walked with Nora, pointing out different types of trees. Ruby held both Victoria's and Dan's hands, swinging between them. This was everything Victoria had been too scared to want for so long. Normalcy, contentment, the simple joy of a Sunday morning with people who loved her not for what she provided, but for who she was. But even in paradise, complications existed. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Victoria's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Victoria Cooper speaking. The voice on the other end was hesitant. Victoria, it's David. I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to talk to you about something important. Victoria's guard went up immediately. David had attended the wedding as promised and had been making slow, tentative progress rebuilding relationships with his daughters over the past 2 years. Isabel saw him monthly for lunch. The twins had agreed to quarterly visits. Nora remained wary. Ruby barely remembered him as anything other than the man who used to live here. But Lily had formed her own careful connection with her biological uncle, curious about the family she came from. What is it, David? His voice carried an emotion she couldn't quite place. I've been diagnosed with early-stage colon cancer. It's treatable, the prognosis is good, but it's made me think about a lot of things. About family, about legacy, about making things right while I still can. Victoria's first instinct was suspicion. David had a pattern of using crises to manipulate situations to his advantage. But something in his voice sounded genuine. I'm sorry to hear that. What kind of treatment are you looking at? Surgery next month, then chemo. The doctors are optimistic, but it's going to be a rough few months. He paused before continuing. I wanted to ask if it would be okay to see the girls more during this time. Not to burden them with my illness, but I've wasted so much time, Victoria. I don't want to waste whatever time I have left. Victoria felt Dan's presence before she saw him. He'd come into the room and was watching her with concerned eyes. She put the phone on speaker. David, Dan is here. Whatever you need to say, you can say it to both of us. David's exhale sounded relieved. Dan, I'm glad you're there. I was just telling Victoria that I've been diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to be okay. But it's made me realize I need to be more present in my daughters' lives. In Lily's life, too, if she wants me there. Dan's response came measured. That's between you and the girls. They're old enough to decide how much contact they want. But David, you need to understand. You don't get to be their hero just because you're sick. You have to do the actual work of showing up, being consistent, earning their trust. The words were firm, but not unkind, and Victoria loved her husband even more for his ability to be both protective and fair. David agreed quietly. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for some deathbed reconciliation. I'm just asking for the chance to keep trying, to keep showing up, like you said." After they ended the call, Victoria and Dan sat together on the couch in silence. Finally, Victoria spoke. "Do you think he means it this time?" "I think cancer has a way of clarifying what matters. Whether that clarity lasts beyond the crisis, that's the question." Victoria leaned her head on Dan's shoulder. "The girls will want to see him more, Isabel especially. She's been hoping he'd step up." "Then we support them in that. We make sure they know we're here, that our family is stable no matter what happens with David." Dan's fingers traced patterns on her arm. "You know what's different this time? 2 years ago, this would have sent you into a tailspin. You would have tried to control everything, protect everyone, build walls to keep the pain out." Victoria realized he was right. "And now? Now you trust that we're strong enough as a family to handle whatever comes. That's growth." She kissed him softly. "You made me strong enough." "No, I just helped you remember you already were." The next day, Victoria sat down with all 6 girls to talk about David's diagnosis. She explained it in age-appropriate terms. Uncle David was sick, but the doctors could help him. He wanted to spend more time with them if they wanted that too. It was completely their choice how much contact they had. Isabel's reaction was immediate. "I want to see him more, maybe once a week instead of once a month." The twins exchanged glances before Grace spoke. "We'll keep doing our quarterly thing. That feels right." Nora surprised everyone. "I'll go with Izzy sometimes. Not every week, but sometimes." Ruby looked confused. "Is he going to die, like Lily's first mommy died?" The question hung in the air until Dan knelt down beside her. "The doctors don't think so, sweetheart. They caught it early. But you're right that people do get sick sometimes, and it reminds us to love each other while we can." Lily, who understood loss in a way the other girls didn't, asked the question Victoria had been dreading. "If Uncle David dies, will my birth mom's whole family be gone?" Victoria pulled Lily onto her lap. "Your birth mom's family will never be gone, baby. You have Isabel, Grace, Hannah, Nora, and Ruby. They're your cousins and your sisters. And you have me and Dan. We're your family, and we're not going anywhere." The conversation shifted to lighter topics eventually, but Victoria noticed Lily remained quiet for the rest of the day. That evening, she found her youngest daughter sitting in the garden, staring at the stars. Victoria sat beside her. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" Lily's voice came small. "Do you think my birth mom would be happy? That I'm here with you guys?" The question broke Victoria's heart and mended it simultaneously. "I think Sarah would be incredibly proud of the girl you've become, and I think she'd be grateful that you found a family who loves you exactly as you are." "Do you think she's with my first mommy now? In heaven?" Victoria had to swallow past the lump in her throat. "I think if heaven exists, Rachel is definitely there. And if Sarah is too, then yes, I bet they're together. And I bet they're both watching over you." Lily leaned against Victoria's side. "I'm glad I have you, Mama Victoria. Even though I miss my first mommy sometimes, I'm glad I have you too." "You can love them both, you know. Missing Rachel doesn't mean you love me less. Love isn't a limited resource, it multiplies." The words were Dan's, repeated so often in their household that they'd become a family mantra. Love doesn't replace love, it multiplies. Lily seemed to consider this before asking, "If Uncle David gets better, will he want me to live with him? Because he's my real uncle?" Victoria's arms tightened around the girl.
No one will ever take you away from this family.
You're ours, and we're yours, and that's forever. Uncle David doesn't want that either. He just wants to know you, if you want to know him.
I think I do want to know him. Is that okay?
Of course it's okay. He's part of your story, part of where you came from.
It's good to understand our stories. They sat together watching the stars until Dan came out to tell them it was bedtime. As Lily ran inside, Dan sat down in her vacated spot.
Everything okay?
She's processing, asking big questions about family and belonging and whether loving me means betraying Rachel's memory. Dan's arm came around her shoulders.
And what did you tell her?
That love multiplies, that she can hold all of it, Rachel, Sarah, us, even David, in her heart at the same time.
Good answer. They sat in comfortable silence until Victoria asked the question that had been nagging at her.
Do you ever worry that it's all too good to be true? That something will come and shatter this happiness we've built?
Dan pulled her closer. Every single day. But I learned something when Rachel died. You can't protect yourself from pain by refusing joy. You just end up with less of both. So yeah, I'm scared something bad might happen. But I'm not going to let that fear stop me from being all in on this life, this family, this love.
Victoria turned to face him. When did you get so wise?
When I met a woman who was brave enough to tear down her walls and let herself be loved.
That's a nice story, but we both know I fought you every step of the way.
Dan grinned. True, but you fought because you cared, because it mattered. Indifference would have been so much worse. They kissed under the stars, and Victoria felt grateful for every choice that had led them here, even the painful ones, even the mistakes, even the moments she'd wanted to give up. David's surgery went well. He spent a week in the hospital, followed by 6 weeks of chemotherapy that left him weak and nauseous, but determined. Isabel visited him twice a week, bringing homemade cards and sitting with him during treatments. Nora went monthly, still cautious, but slowly warming. The twins maintained their quarterly schedule. Ruby remained largely indifferent, too young to fully understand, and Lily went once, spending an afternoon asking David questions about Sarah, what she was like, what she loved, why she made the choices she made. David answered honestly, tears streaming down his face as he told Lily about his sister's kindness, her fear of disappointing their parents, her desperate wish for her baby to have a better life than she thought she could provide. When Lily came home that day, she climbed into Victoria's lap and cried for the mother she'd never known, for the choice that had given her life but cost Sarah hers, for all the complicated emotions that came with understanding her origin story. Victoria held her and let her feel it all, offering no platitudes or easy answers, just presence and unconditional love. Dan watched from the doorway, and when Lily finally fell asleep in Victoria's arms, he carried her to bed. Afterward, he and Victoria stood in Lily's room, watching her sleep. Victoria whispered, "She's going to be okay, isn't she?" "More than okay. She's going to be extraordinary. Because she knows she's loved from every direction, by us, by her sisters, by the memory of Rachel, by the love Sarah had for her even in letting her go, even by David in his imperfect way. That's a lot for a 9-year-old to carry." Dan corrected gently. That's not weight she's carrying. It's foundation she's standing on. There's a difference. 3 months later, David finished his final chemotherapy session. The scans showed he was cancer-free,
though he'd need regular monitoring. He'd lost weight and hair, but gained something else, a clarity about what mattered and a commitment to being the father he should have been all along. He invited all 6 girls to a family dinner at his apartment, the first time he'd hosted them together. Victoria and Dan drove them over, planning to pick them up in 2 hours. As the girls filed out of the car, Isabel turned back. "Thanks, Mom, for letting us do this." Victoria smiled. "You don't need my permission to love your father, Izzy. You just need to protect your heart while you figure out if he's earned your trust." After dropping them off, Dan and Victoria had 2 unexpected hours alone, a rarity with 6 children. They went to a coffee shop and sat by the window, holding hands across the table like teenagers. Dan traced circles on her palm. "When was the last time we did this? Just the 2 of us?" "I genuinely can't remember. 6 months ago? A year?" "We should do it more often. Remember, we're not just parents. We're partners." Victoria agreed. "I love our family. I love the chaos and the noise and the constant demands. But I also love this. Just us. Quiet. Connected." They talked about everything and nothing. Dan's business expansion plans, Victoria's consideration of writing a book about balancing leadership and parenthood, their dreams for the future, their fears, their hopes. An hour in, Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. "Dad's doing really well. He made dinner himself and asked us about school. Really asked, not just pretended to listen." Nora's laughing. "This is good." Victoria showed the text to Dan, who read it with a thoughtful expression. "How does that make you feel? Him stepping up after all this time?" "Honestly, relieved. Not for me, I don't need him for anything, but for the girls. They deserve a father who chooses them, even if it took cancer to wake him up." Dan considered this. "Do you think people can really change? Or do they just become better versions of what they always were?" "I think crisis reveals who we really are. David was always capable of being a good father, he just chose other things instead. Now he's choosing differently. Whether that lasts, time will tell." When they picked up the girls 2 hours later, all 6 were animated, talking over each other about dinner, about David's new apartment, about his promise to come to Isabel's student council presentation next week. On the drive home, Victoria caught Dan's eye in the rearview mirror. He mouthed, "Good?" She nodded. "Good." That night, after tucking everyone in, Victoria found Dan in their bedroom looking at old photos on his phone. She recognized the pictures. Rachel, younger and healthy, holding baby Lily. She sat beside him. "You okay?" "Yeah, just remembering." Lily asked David today what Sarah looked like, and it made me think about how little Lily remembers Rachel. She was so young when Rachel died. His voice roughened. "Sometimes I'm scared she'll forget her completely." Victoria took his hand. "She won't forget. We won't let her. We tell Rachel's stories, we look at pictures, we talk about her like she's still part of our family, because she is. And when Lily's older, she'll understand that Rachel gave her the foundation of love she needed, even if she can't remember the specific moments." Dan pulled Victoria close. "Thank you for never being threatened by her memory. Some people would want to erase the past, but you've made Rachel part of our present. She's Lily's mother. Nothing will ever change that. I'm just grateful I get to be her mother too." "You know what Rachel would say if she could see us now?" "What?" Dan smiled through tears. "She'd say I chose well, that you love Lily exactly the way she'd hoped someone would. And she'd probably make some joke about how I better not mess this up." Victoria laughed softly. "I think I would have liked her." She would have loved you. The two most stubborn, brilliant women I've ever known. You would have either been best friends or mortal enemies, no in between. They sat together in comfortable silence until Victoria asked, "Do you think about the odds sometimes? Of everything that had to happen for us to find each other? For Lily to end up being my daughter's cousin? For you to show up at my house that specific day?" All the time. It should have been impossible. But maybe impossible things happen more often than we think. Maybe the universe conspires to bring people together when they need each other most. Victoria settled against his chest. I used to think I had to control everything to keep my world from falling apart. Now I know the best things happen when I let go of control and trust the process. Look at you, all wise and enlightened. I learned from the best. The school year continued with its predictable rhythms. Isabel's student council project on supporting kids from divorced families gained traction, and she was interviewed by the local paper. The twins' art show featured a collaborative piece about family that made Victoria cry. Nora won another contest, this time for a short story about a girl who learned that families are built through choice, not just blood. Ruby excelled in first grade, her teacher reporting that she had an unusual gift for helping other children work through conflicts. And Lily returned to competitive soccer, her team making it to the regional championships. Victoria attended every game, every art show, every presentation. Dan did too, often bringing his camera to document the moments they'd look back on years from now. One Saturday in November, Victoria's company held its annual gala, a black tie event celebrating the year's achievements and announcing next year's initiatives. She'd been dreading it, knowing it meant an evening away from the family, but Gerald convinced her it was important for morale. The surprise came when Dan showed up in a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome. You didn't think I'd let you go alone, did you? But the girls are having a movie marathon with Jennifer, all 6 of them, plus sleeping bags and enough popcorn to feed an army. We have the whole night. At the gala, Victoria found herself seeing her company through new eyes. The employees who'd once seemed like cogs in a machine were now people she knew by name, people with families and dreams and struggles of their own. She'd learned to lead differently, to value presence over performance metrics, to understand that sustainable success came from supporting the whole person, not just extracting productivity. During her speech, she deviated from the prepared remarks. 2 years ago, I stood at a crossroads. I could keep building an empire at the expense of everything else, or I could choose to build a life. I chose the life. And what I discovered is that the empire didn't crumble, it grew stronger. Because when we lead from presence instead of pressure, from connection instead of control, everyone thrives. She continued, her voice gaining strength. I used to think showing vulnerability was weakness, that admitting I needed help meant I'd failed. But I've learned that the bravest thing any of us can do is ask for support, accept help, and show up imperfectly but honestly. That's true leadership. That's true strength. The room erupted in applause, and when Victoria returned to her table, Dan stood to pull out her chair. He whispered in her ear, Rachel would be so proud of who you've become. The comment surprised her. Rachel? Why would you say that? Because she used to talk about changing healthcare culture, about how the pressure to be perfect was killing doctors and nurses, how the system rewarded martyrdom over sustainability. She'd love that you're proving there's another way. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I wish I could have met her. Really met her, not just inherited pieces of her through Lily and you. You carry her forward every time you choose presence over perfection. Every time you teach our girls that feelings matter more than appearances. Every time you show them that vulnerability is strength. They danced later, swaying to music neither really heard,
lost in each other and the miracle of finding love after loss. On the drive home, Victoria rested her head on Dan's shoulder. "Thank you for pushing me to go tonight. I needed the reminder of who I am outside of just being mom. You're extraordinary in every role you play. CEO, mother, wife, friend. You contain multitudes. So do you. Businessman, father, widower, husband. You hold all of it with such grace." Dan pulled into their driveway. "We hold it together. That's the secret. We don't have to carry it alone anymore." Inside, they found all 6 girls crashed in the living room, a tangle of sleeping bags and stuffed animals. Jennifer was reading on the couch and looked up with a smile. They made it through 3 movies before surrendering. Lily lasted the longest. After Jennifer left, Dan and Victoria stood looking at their sleeping daughters. 6 girls, 6 different stories, 1 family. Victoria whispered, "I never imagined this fullness, this joy." Neither did I. After Rachel died, I thought the best I could hope for was survival. Instead, I got this: a love that honors the past while building the future, children who teach me as much as I teach them, a partner who sees all of me and chooses me anyway. They carried sleeping girls to beds, tucked them in, kissed foreheads. The routine of parenting that Victoria had once resented now felt sacred. These small acts of care that said, "I love you," without words. Later, in their own bed, Dan pulled Victoria close. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't taken that emergency cleaning call? If I'd sent one of my employees instead?" "Every day. And then I stopped thinking about it, because what-ifs don't matter. What matters is we found each other. However it happened, whatever brought us together, we're here now. Here now." I like that. Victoria smiled in the darkness. It's all we ever really have. Here, now, this moment. The rest is just stories we tell ourselves about the past or future. When did you get so philosophical? When I married a man who taught me that the present is the only gift that matters. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, 2 people who'd both lost everything and found something better, not because the pain disappeared, but because they'd learned to build joy alongside grief, to hold both light and darkness without letting either consume them. Christmas that year was a chaos of wrapping paper and laughter. All 6 girls had made gifts for each other, and watching them exchange their handmade treasures was better than anything money could buy. Isabel had written each sister a letter about what made them special. The twins had painted portraits of the whole family. Nora had composed a song on the piano. Ruby had made friendship bracelets. And Lily had created a photo album documenting their year together. Victoria and Dan had gone simpler, experiences instead of things. Tickets to shows, lessons for activities the girls wanted to try, a family vacation planned for summer. But the real gift came from David, who showed up on Christmas morning with a box of letters. He explained to the girls that he'd been writing to each of them, letters about memories, apologies, hopes for the future, stories about their family history. His voice shook as he spoke. "I can't give you back the time I wasted, but I can give you these, the truth about where you come from, who your ancestors were, what I should have been teaching you all along." For Lily specifically, he'd compiled everything he knew about Sarah: photos, journal entries, medical records, stories from people who'd known her. A complete portrait of the woman who'd given Lily life. Lily clutched the box to her chest. "Thank you, Uncle David. This is the best present ever." David's eyes filled with tears. "You deserve to know her. You all did. I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave enough to share her with you." After David left, Victoria found him sitting in his car in the driveway, crying. She tapped on the window, and he rolled it down. Her voice came gentle. "You okay?" "I don't deserve them. Any of them. After everything I did, after all the ways I failed, they're still giving me chances. I don't understand it." Victoria crouched down to his eye level. "That's what family does, David. Real family. Not the perfect image we pretend to be, but the messy, complicated reality of people who keep showing up for each other even when it's hard. You're teaching them that. You and Dan. This grace they're extending to me, it comes from watching you extend grace to yourself, to each other, to everyone around you." Victoria stood. "Drive safe. And David? Keep showing up. That's all anyone can ask." She watched him drive away and felt something she never expected to feel toward her ex-husband. Compassion. Not forgiveness for the past, but hope for his future. Hope that he'd become the father his daughters deserved, the uncle Lily needed, the man he was capable of being. Dan came out to join her. "You're a good person, Victoria Cooper." "I'm a work in progress. We all are." "That's what makes you good. You keep progressing." They walked back inside together, hand in hand, toward the sound of 6 girls laughing over some shared joke. This was the life Victoria had been too scared to imagine. Loud, unpredictable, demanding, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. That night, after everyone was asleep, Victoria sat at her desk and did something she'd been thinking about for months. She opened a new document and began typing. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. I stood at the top of my staircase, watching my 5th nanny quit in as many weeks, and I realized I had a choice: keep trying to control everything and lose what mattered most, or surrender control and find out what love really meant. She wrote for 2 hours, the story pouring out of her, not a manual or a business book, but a memoir. Her journey from Ice Queen CEO to present mother. From woman terrified of vulnerability to someone who'd learned that opening your heart was the bravest thing you could do. Dan found her around midnight. "What are you working on?" "Our story, or my version of it anyway. The story of how a cleaning man saved a broken family by teaching them that love multiplies when you stop trying to control it." Dan read over her shoulder. "That's beautiful. Are you going to publish it?" "Maybe, or maybe I'll just give it to the girls someday. Let them know that even when things seem impossible, even when you've built walls so high you can't see over them anymore, love finds a way in if you're brave enough to let it." That's a story worth sharing. Victoria saved the document and closed her laptop. It's our story. All 8 of us. 6 girls, 2 parents, and a love that multiplied until it filled every corner of our lives. They went to bed holding each other, 2 people who'd survived loss and found something better, not because the pain disappeared, but because they'd learned to hold joy and grief simultaneously, to honor the past while building the future, to understand that family isn't born, it's built through daily choices to show up, be present, and love without conditions. The next morning started like every other: pancakes, chaos, laughter, and the controlled disaster of 8 people trying to navigate the morning routine. Ruby spilled juice. Nora couldn't find her favorite shoes. The twins argued over bathroom time. Isabel tried to mediate while Lily simply observed it all with those wise eyes that saw too much. Victoria and Dan moved through it with practiced ease, a dance they'd perfected over 2 years of trial and error. They were a team now, partners in every sense of the word,
co-pilots navigating the beautiful turbulence of raising 6 daughters. As everyone finally headed out the door to various activities, Victoria caught Dan's hand. "You know what I realized?" "What's that?" "I spent years building a company worth billions. But this family we've created, it's worth everything. Every sacrifice, every scary moment of vulnerability, every time I wanted to run back to my walls, but chose to stay open instead. Worth everything." Dan pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "We built something neither of us could have built alone. That's the magic. Not that we're perfect, but that together, we're enough." Victoria looked around at their home, their life, their beautiful chaos, and felt gratitude flood through her. She'd started with nothing but money and emptiness. She'd ended with everything that mattered. Love had multiplied. That was the secret she'd learned from a widowed cleaning man with kind eyes and a generous heart. Love didn't replace love. It multiplied, expanding to fill whatever space you gave it, growing larger with every person who chose to be part of your family. And their family would keep growing, not necessarily in number, but in depth, in connection, in the daily choice to show up for each other no matter what life threw their way. That was the story she'd tell her daughter someday. That was the legacy she and Dan were building together. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but connection. Not walls, but wings. Dragons learning to shelter instead of burn. Families learning to multiply love instead of divide it. People learning that the bravest thing they could do was show up scared and love anyway. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.